Who amongst us has been told to be seen and not heard? How many of us have told the truth of our abuse, to only be told to keep silent about it? Often you get cited that the reputation of the family or the abuser is not to be publicly discussed. That doing so is improper. You are supposed to be ashamed for the outside world to know what happens behind closed doors, even if it is your only hope of being free from the abuse. Often, from my personal experience, people act with contempt towards you, accusing you of looking for sympathy. I am not looking for sympathy. I do not need it because there is nothing wrong with me. I am looking for awareness of abuses that do not bruise. If you have to feel sympathy for anyone in my stories, do so for the abusers. They are unaware of the red words, and it is very sad. Many of us are also trained to be uncomfortable when we hear the true stories of victims. This is by design to silence accountability for the abusers. Who determined the standards of propriety surrounding what is acceptable to share publicly? We live in systems designed by abusers to sustain their powers through abuse. The amendments to our Constitution are proof of this. The amendments are purple words. It was written by enslavers to maintain social class support of the owners and the earners, but not those they saw as a commodity. Pimps, Johns and hoes. Just look at a wealth distribution bar graph if you do not believe me. Even though our founding fathers were enslavers and elitists, they were humble enough to recognise they were not doing it right. They made the document to advance as society eliminated elitism from itself. The enslavement or abuse of the lesser class of people by their betters is a story created to justify that abusive ideology. A red word mythologies made law. Today's story is about the first time I realised my voice would be ignored no matter if it was right. Why is it wrong to talk about abuse openly? Why is telling the truth not the preferred or expected action? Why is speaking out demonised? By making the subject taboo to speak of openly, the abusers' reputations are kept safe to keep abusing. I was 5 when I first learned this lesson of injustice in actuality. My brother and I were outside playing while Mum was cooking dinner. My sister was in the house doing her homework, and Dad was away from home working until the next evening. In our playing, my brother got frustrated by me outrunning him. He grabbed a thin slat of wood with a nail sticking out of its end from the scrap pile. He began to chase me, swinging the nailed end wildly, causing me to find ways of avoiding the nail from getting stuck in me. I climbed up onto the bracing Dad had built by the chopping block to keep the woodpile from leaning. It was built like a balance beam and about 4 feet off the ground. I was doing really well on the 4-inch beam, avoiding my brother's wild swings until he jabbed the stick at me like a pike. In my attempts to avoid the blow from the nailed slat, I fell backwards onto the chopping block, hitting my right elbow as I dropped. I immediately began to scream in pain and cry. I had spiral fractured my funny bone on impact, and my arm was stuck in a bent position. My brother immediately went wide-eyed and terrified, then ran into the house. I was just relieved, thinking he was going for help, because I had landed in loose cuts of wood for the wood stove and could not get my 5-year-old body up with the impaired arm. I was still screaming in pain, bawling my eyes out. I kept looking towards the house, waiting for my mum to come rescue me from the cut wood, but she never came. I cried in pain for hours. I was unable to figure out how to get myself up in the clumsy array of scattered wood that moved, unbalancing me at every attempt. I was in need of help, desperate for human assistance. It did not matter how much I needed help, my cries were ignored. Authors, do you remember in previous stories that my mother considered me the crybaby? Because I was constantly running to her from the abuses my sister inflicted on me, which she always lied about doing. I had become the boy who cried wolf. Mom had heard my cries of pain for hours and reasoned it was nothing. Once I saw that I was never going to get help, I began the painful rolling process through the roughly strewn pieces of wood and dirt. Every movement foreign to me without the arm, I was used to being a helper, instead of causing excruciating pain. It took nearly a half hour to get out of the woodpile and reach the grass, but I still could not stand. The step to the basement door was about 10 yards away from me. I sobbed, knowing how much this would hurt, then began to roll myself to the steps. When I got there, I used them to get to my feet and go into the house through the basement. My crying was no longer pleading. It was just a painful defeat. I worked my way up the stairs to the house to ask for help. Mom met me at the bathroom, instantly upset by how dirty I was, ignoring my attempts to tell her I was hurt. She began the bath, telling me to get undressed. I told her I couldn't because my arm was hurt. She did not care. I was just being a crybaby and overdramatic. She angrily came over and began removing my clothes. When she got to my shirt, she yanked repeatedly with her full weight to get my arm to straighten to pull the shirt over my head. I screamed in pain, sobbing with every yank. Once the shirt was off, I was relieved to get into the warm bath. It felt so much better than I did, but the relief did not last long. Within a few minutes, my arm had swollen from a 5-year-old's arm to an adult-sized arm. I just sat there looking at it in awe and wonder. I was getting accustomed to the pain after the yanking session, so I was just fascinated by how quickly it grew. Mom came back after about 15 minutes in the tub to get me out and saw my arm. I watched as she recognised she had been the abuser of someone she loved, seconds before she swooped me up to examine me. From this point, everything became an adventure for me. Mum got me and my sister into the car, leaving my brother with the neighbour. We went to the nearest hospital and I got my very first X-ray. Unfortunately, their paediatric bone specialist was on vacation, so we had to travel another hour away to the next hospital. I did get a sling though. That whole hour trip was what kept me trying to gain my sister's approval later in my life before no contact. She was genuinely scared for me. She held me like she loved me, soothing me the entire trip. I have suspicions she made it easier for Mum to ignore my cries of pain from within the house. There are so few of these moments from her for me in my life that I remember every single one. I just wish it did not take me almost dying for it to happen. I'm also not sure if it was care for me or for her favourite plaything. Uncertainties like this are why I have to have no contact with my sister. I am safer this way. Once I reached the other hospital, I was spoiled rotten. There were no other children in the children's ward, so all the nurses would come check on me as often as they could and sneak me a popsicle for being such a good patient. The brake needed to go into traction, so my bent arm was suspended with a steel pin on either side of my elbow to set the brake. I even got the X-ray guys take an X-ray of my Snoopy stuffed animal to prove to me it was safe, because I had to go to another room for the first one, and they had rolled that one in. Then after that, I got to learn how to do everything with my left hand, and had a really cool cast that all the other school kids coloured on for me. I have to find the joy in life wherever I can. I learned that at 5 years old from a broken arm. The gaslighting of my abuses from my sister, the abuser, caused me to be treated with indifference in my need. How much of my neglect was from her influences on our mother? I do not know. I know it is vile to do such things, and we should all treat people when we discover what they have done accordingly. We should not hem and haw stating we want to wait for evidence of wrongdoing. We should not tell people that maybe they deserved it. The lack of respect for those people's humanity is shameful. That is something you can correct, but you have to feel bad about doing it first. Accountability cannot happen if you cannot accept your bad actions as things you are accountable for. This is something those flawed founding fathers understood. That is why they wrote our laws to improve as society did. They understood how big the red words were in the world. They knew that the only way to get the red words to change was going to be through action. That is why they began the revolution for freedom. They did not gain freedom in those wars. They won the freedom to try to be free of the red words. They knew the red words were there, and that people needed the chance to escape them, even if they themselves were unable to do so in their time. That is the American legacy of a true patriot, someone who fights for the freedom of all, not just for the profiting. Those who find the purple words and speak out against the red words are patriots to a national ideology based in truth, based in human equality. So authors, when has what seemed to be the worst thing ever turned into an adventure for you? Have you missed out on potential adventures because of the fog of the abuses before? I had a unique situation where the acceptance of indifference towards me made my appreciation for what I did have greater than the pain of the abuse. I hope every one of you gets to that point of understanding of the truths of reality, where you are finding the purple words to replace the red. That place is built on truth, where desires of returned affections from your abusers cannot undermine them. Confidence of self, despite the damages that did not bruise you. When you set limits of expectations that are genuine to your situation, you eliminate an abuser's ability to manipulate you in that area. But those red words are everywhere, hidden beneath propriety and expectation. This means we authors have to keep our eyes, ears and minds open for new information. We are a social creature who has achieved amazing feats because we share stories of truth to build on. Get to writing those beautiful Purple Tales authors. I cannot wait to see how they turn out.